You're listening to the Snob OS Podcast, the podcast for Apple snobs. Yo, this is Terrence Gaines, aka Brother Tech.
And this is Nika Montford, aka Tech Savvy Diva.
And welcome back to the Snob OS Show, the show for Apple snobs, where we talk all things Apple and then some. We want to thank you back to another episode. This is episode 271 of the Snob OS Cast. That is a lot of episodes, so we definitely want to say thank you for hanging out with us for this long. Thank you for the reviews. Thank you for the shares. Thank you for the financial support. If you want to be a financial supporter of our show, please go to patreon.com/snoboscast. And as a thank you for your financial support, you do get to get the show early because we stream it live. And those who are a member of our Patreon get to watch it live. You get some additional bonus. You get a free pre-show that is not covered when we listen to the show on the podcast on Fridays. We get some extra exclusive content for our financial supporters. So just as a thank you for those who are supporting financially. So like I said, if you want to become a snobist, which is what we lovingly call our community, please go to patreon.com/snoboscast. So we're going to get right into this week's show. As per usual, we always start with the lowdown. And I wanted to talk about this show as we saw WWDC. We all know that Apple is launching its own version of AI, which they call Apple Intelligence. It's going to be integrated into the phones. It's going to be heavily integrated into Siri. So you can just ask your phone a question, and based on all the information, all the data you have in your iCloud on your phone, it's going to do what AI does and handle a lot of tasks, answer a lot of questions, and do a lot of what's a good word? What's the word?
Computation?
No. I'm at a lost words. A lot of tasks is the word.
Okay. I was trying to figure out where you were going.
Do a lot of tasks on your behalf. For the tasks or the requests or the questions that you ask that your phone or Siri cannot do, Apple announced a partnership with OpenAI that'll enable you to go to the web and go to OpenAI's generative AI and answer all these questions and provide all this different additional information. Well, word on the street is that Facebook approached Apple in March about a partnership, but Apple kind of said, nah, we ain't doing it.
We good.
Right. According to the story, according to Bloomberg, Meta approached Apple in March about a partnership, but this never resulted in more than a simple discussion, as Apple doesn't consider the privacy practices of Meta stringent enough. Part of the OpenAI idea is that it can't train on any data sent by Siri. So we all know Apple is super focused on security and data privacy. What they did not want to do, or what they wasn't sure about, according to the story, is Meta's security practices. We've heard story upon story upon story about Meta and their data privacy as they are possibly sharing data with advertisers and all the misinformation in Meta. So it sounds like Apple is kind of like, nah, we would rather, even though OpenAI recently has been full speed ahead as far as just come hell or high water, we're doing AI. Mm-hmm. It's crazy, or not crazy. It's surprising that Apple still chose OpenAI over Meta, because according to Apple, Meta their security practices and their privacy practices are not up to snuff. So I wanted to ask you, what does this say about Meta?
It says that it's really bad. If they think OpenAI is a better alternative, right? Because we've all, been privy to at least some of what OpenAI issues are. And the issues that we've heard about are not good at all. And if Apple did its due diligence and said, if we got to pick one or the other, we'd rather go with this guy. And we are, like I said, aware of the issues that OpenAI has. They've even, addressed some of the issues publicly. that they've had with their data privacy. But for
Mm-hmm.
them to say no
Right.
because Meta is so much worse, yikes, that is bad.
Right. So
Wow.
I wonder if that is 100% true. And my sneaking suspicion and my speculation is, in addition to Apple claiming that Meta isn't all that safe or private as it relates to their end user data,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure there's some pettiness going on, and
Yeah.
Apple ain't forgot all of the the shade,
The shenanigans.
that Zuckerberg threw,
Zuckerberger.
threw at Apple back in the day.
Yeah.
Which again,
Or even as much as what a couple of years ago with the web tracking.
mm-hmm. Yep. That, I think that was the main thing. Apple turned on that Ask App Not to Track feature, and
Mm-hmm.
normally most people say, "Nah, I don't want the app to track you."
Nope.
Which Meta was the main
That's how
services.
their advertisers get a lot of their money. They're like, we need to follow you after you leave so we can know what else you're into so we can send you targeted ads.
Yep, exactly. Which is why a lot of people, you've heard them. People, they make jokes on social media about them just mentioning something and then
Mm-hmm.
going on Facebook, going on Instagram, going on WhatsApp, going on Threads, and seeing ads, right, about the thing that they just talked about. This is probably because Meta has been following you around outside of its own property. So if you just go to Google, if you just go to YouTube, if you just go to any place else, those cookies, they're not cookies, they're something else. I forget the name of them. Web trackers are actually following you. They're not logging keystrokes. They're not seeing your passwords or anything like that, but they're checking what sites you go to.
Yeah.
And then if there is a relevant ad, they will serve you that ad once you go back over to a Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram property, So I think when Apple did that and Zuckerberg lobbed all that shade against Apple for doing that, Apple was like, all right. All right. And then when Facebook rolled up saying, "Hey, what about this AI partnership?" Apple was like, "Nah, we're good." So
I'm wondering also if there are other stipulations that Apple had that Meta wasn't open to. You just talked about the web tracking. I wonder if Apple had some additional concerns about some internal practices within Meta that they may not have necessarily been privy to the details behind it, but just knowing how it works on the surface or what they've published. If Apple maybe wanted some extra levels or layers of security that maybe Meta wasn't willing to go with because it would influence or impact their business and the way they model their business after. So I'm wondering if it isn't a little bit of all those things kind of mixed in together.
And it could also be that Meta wanted to train its AI off of data supplied by Siri. Like if let's just say, for argument's sake, that this did work and Meta and Apple partnered. And if I asked Siri a question that it didn't already have that data on my device, and I had to click use Meta to answer this question, I'm pretty sure Meta was chomping at the bit to train its own AI off of that data.
Yeah.
And OpenAI was like, well, we won't train off of that data. And Apple was like, sold. When Meta actually wanted to train that data, and Apple was like, "No, we ain't doing that." So Meta was like, "All right, well, what's the point then?"
I would really love to see the SOW from the partnership with Apple and Meta. I bet that was some pretty interesting reading.
Well, maybe it didn't even get that far. According to the story, it didn't get any farther than.
Oh, wow.
It says, let me see. Like I said, Meta approached Apple in March, but this never resulted in more than a simple discussion.
Oh, well, yeah.
So they just chit chatted for a little bit on Teams, and
they were on Zoom, and Apple was like, "You know what?
Nah, we're good.
We're good on this."
Right. All right, that's enough for that story. We're going to move into our next story. We kind of talked about this in our pre-show, and you got to be a Patreon subscriber to get the exclusive content. but we kind of alluded to Apple preparing for iPhone RCS support. So much so that carriers are now starting to turn on the functionality for beta users. So if you're an iPhone user and you love to, or you're a developer and you're actually developing an app that has some sort of messages integration, or you're just an Apple developer, you want to see what things are going on prior to the public beta and prior to the actual iOS 18 coming out.
Mm-hmm.
There are some beta users, specifically with iOS beta 2, to where carriers are actually turning on this feature and they're working on the updates on their part right now, as opposed to waiting until the rest of us, the non-developers, Gen Pop, actually gets iOS 18. So, like you mentioned, there are people who are putting tweets up and putting screenshots of the functionality. So, what you said something about there being like a toggle?
Like it's a toggle. I was trying to find it because I saw it on Twitter, but it's basically like a toggle, an RCS toggle that you can toggle it on and toggle it off whether you want to use it or not.
Yeah, sure. In this story, the 9 to 5 Mac, it says, if you've already updated your iPhone to the latest iOS 18 beta and use one of these carriers, you can try enabling RCS by going to settings, apps, messages, and then toggling it. They say one of these carriers, but they don't specify the carrier.
Okay, which one?
So I'm assuming it's Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, I would assume. But they really don't specify. Let me look through it. Nope, they really don't specify. So, but all that to say, it looks like RCS is going to be an actual thing if, in fact, that Apple is working with the carriers and the carriers are actually updating their networks to support RCS. So there should be some happy iPhone and Android users who commingle and co-mix in these text message streets, to where you will see some nicer videos, nicer photos. One of the things I think is a major win for Android users is the fact that when iPhone users are responding to a text, you see the three bubbles that is thinking, is writing, is writing, is writing. I think Android users will get that functionality. That's not a feature that's going to be specific to iMessage users. If you are responding to a text message, even though it's a green bubble, and if you're texting somebody on an iPhone, or in reverse, if you're an Android user and if you text somebody a message and the iPhone user is responding, you'll see those green dots on Android as well. So
yeah, so I didn't find the tweet of the person I follow, but I did see on Mac Rumors where it shows, if you go into the settings under messaging and you have like the MMS messaging toggle, is basically an RCS messaging toggle. That looks the same. Just turn it off and on. Yeah.
I wonder why it wouldn't just be on. I wonder why they give you the ability to turn RCS off.
Petty Apple. Oh. They trying to force this. They're trying to force this on me. I'm gonna put it on there, but you don't have to use it if you don't want to.
Right. I would turn it on and leave it on because, again, as an iPhone user who does text Android users, the message can be a little discombobulating. So I would just turn it on just to keep confusion down, not necessarily because I'm revolting, but there are some people who love to revolt for no other reason than to be contrarian.
You're rebels.
Right. So they'll turn this off just out of spite. So I guess Apple's like, all right, well, we'll just give you that option.
We'll feed into the petty.
All right. So the next story that I've got out is AirPods and Beats. There is firmware available for both AirPods and Beats firmware. What makes this surprising is in the past, Apple has not really told us specifically what the latest firmware for AirPods and Beats. But according to this latest firmware update, according to the document, today's firmware update, which is I think happened on Wednesday, if you're listening to this on Friday, according to the document, today's firmware updates address a security issue that could have allowed an attacker within Bluetooth range to spoof the details of the device you're previously connected your headphones to, allowing the attacker to gain access to your headphones and by extension, some features, some functionality of your actual iPhone. So that sounds like that was an important enough firmware update for Apple to say, you know what, let us go ahead and tell you what's in the firmware update, similar to how they tell you what you can expect in an iOS, watchOS, iPadOS, or macOS update.
Yeah, that is a big deal. If you can spoof someone's device through Bluetooth,
yeah.
that's pretty important. So yeah, I can see why they listed that out in the firmware update details. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. As per usual, though, there's no straightforward way or mechanism to initiate a firmware update for AirPods or Beats. Apple simply stating that the updates are, quote, automatically delivered while your headphones are paired with and in Bluetooth range of your iPhone, iPad, or Mac. So if you want to try to, quote unquote, initialize this firmware update, your AirPods have to be connected to and or in range of your phone. And I would just put them in my ear. I would take the headphones out, the AirPods out, or put the headphones over your ear and then try to listen to something. And then that way that'll do that handshake connection and then you'll get that update.
As you can see, I use my AirPods, or for those who are watching, I use my AirPods when we record the show. So I'm sure that I'm
getting the update as you
I should be getting the update.
All right. So the last story I got, we kind of talked earlier about ChaptGPT. It looks like OpenAI has rolled out ChaptGPT for macOS for everyone. Initially limited to just ChaptGPT Plus subscribers, the ChaptGPT desktop app for macOS is now available for non-paying chatbot users, provided that they do have a compatible Mac. So what are your thoughts on people using OpenAI and ChaptGPT on a Mac? Like we mentioned before, OpenAI, is not without its controversies. But the fact that OpenAI will be an option on the iPhone as it relates to Apple Intelligence, and now ChatGPT is rolling out to Mac. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it makes sense, especially since the iOS and the OS updates that we're expecting this fall are going to have Apple Intelligence and are going to be using OpenAI. It only makes sense that now that there is a macOS app for it. It only makes sense. And, my thing with ChatGPT, it can be a very useful tool. Mm-hmm. As with anything, you have to use it to its benefits while being cognizant of the issues with it. Right. Mm-hmm. I use ChatGPT, but when I use it, it's usually in a specific domain. Mm-hmm. And I don't give it any of my information.
Right.
To me, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where it's, again, it's an assistant. So in my case, if I need to write something, or if I need an idea of how to frame something, then I'll pop that in there. And if you want to train on that, knock yourself out. But it's not something that I'm like, here's a photo of my birth certificate, it's fuzzy. Can you clean it up for me to make it legible or make it, into a PDF? Those types of things. You have to be, as with any technology, you have to be smart with the way that you use this technology. Some people just throw caution to the wind and it's like, oh, this is going to be easy. It's going to make my life simple. I don't have to think about it.
Upload all my emails to it.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Let me put my will in this thing. Hey, find the typos in my will and fix it. Those types of things. People can be selfish. Right. They can be very self-centered. And then when, the ish hits the fan, so to speak, and their actions come back with these consequences, and they want to blame this technology. Mm-hmm. Technology isn't a blank carte thing for you to use. You have to be wise and knowledgeable and have some sort of idea of what you're doing and what you're using. Otherwise, you can find yourself in a very, very sticky situation that's going to be hard for you to get out of. So use the technology to its advantage. That for the advantage and the benefit of you, not, just, free wielding, not a care in the world. You have to be smart when you use these things. And I think a lot of time we've become so accustomed to make this easy for me, take this off my plate, that you don't necessarily focus on practical, practical things that you can take out of the frame of technology. Everything, contrary to everybody's belief, everything cannot be solved with technology. Everything doesn't need technology. But if you're going to use it for your benefit, not your detriment.
And if not for all of that you just said, I don't like the idea of a software company using me as labor for free. And by me giving OpenAI or ChaptGPT or Gemini, whichever one, all of this information, I am doing the work for the software company, and they ain't giving me no money. Yes, they make my life
dollars.
Right. Yes, I'm using it as an assistant, like you mentioned, to, cut some corners, make things a little bit easier for me. But it pales in comparison to the gold mine of information that I am supplying this giant software company to make millions and billions of dollars. Now, again, I personally am not generating $1 million for OpenAI, but at the same time, they are getting far much more value
as
from
a collective.
me. Right. They are getting far much more value from me giving it information than the value I'm getting with the result.
In return.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, for that reason, I'm like, I ain't using it. I'm not using it for all that. Now I do use Copilot, Microsoft's version, to generate images for like YouTube thumbnails and Instagram reel covers and stuff like that. That's about it. It's like, all right, that's to me, that's a one-on-one trade-off. I give you a prompt, you give me a picture back, something that's not particular or specific to me, and we handshake and we go about our business, right? Yeah. But again, in that frame of mind, I'm like, nah, I'm not using generative AI for everything, because y'all get more value than I am, and y'all not about to play me like that.
And my thing is, I'm kind of a big picture person, and especially in the area of my expertise and what I work in, my mind kind of goes, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. We're feeding in all this information now. Not, some people not even really thinking too much about it. Oh, I'll pop this image in there, no big deal. Oh, I'll ask it to do this for me, no big deal. But the big deal is all of this data is being stored. 20 years down the road, do we know what the technology is going to look like? Do we know there may be a callback, 20 years later to something you did, on a whim, not even thinking, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's not a problem.
Or on the auspice that it's anonymized. Did I say that correctly? Anonymized data, and it's not connected to you. So they say.
Right. So they say. And that's the thing. We are taking people's and companies whose job is to make money word for it. We're not reading the terms of services. I'm not a legal person, so they can word this legalese to make me think, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's not a big deal. But in actuality, it means something else entirely, but I don't have the acumen for that. So I don't know. I'm just saying, okay. Or I just want to get to the next screen. So I just click, I agree, not even knowing. And then, they got smart. Like, you have to scroll to the bottom to say agree. So it's like, you scroll to the bottom. So you saw all of the words and you still agreed. So it's on you. So to me, it's one of those things where when we look or have the vision or forethought to look down the road another 20, 30, 40 years, what we're doing right now has an impact on that. We don't know what these R&D teams, whether it be at Apple, whether it be at Google, whether it be at OpenAI, they have teams specifically that are in emerging technologies, advanced technologies, that are thinking about preparing for what's going to happen in the year 2050, 2060. They are planning for that type of stuff now. So what we may think is innocuous at this point in the game, it may be a game changer down the road. And that's the thing to me. It's the unknown. We don't know. We don't know what they're building behind the scenes. We don't know how far advanced they are in technology now, because again, it's R&D. I've worked in R&D before for a couple of other companies, and the stuff we were doing and planning for, is just now coming to fruition in some instances. So, and it's things you kind of keep in your back pocket. It's like, oh, we did this. It didn't quite work for this time, so we'll just kind of shelve it. But it's all proprietary code, documentation, hardware that who knows, who says 20, 30 years down the road, you know what? That thing we did back in 2008, 2000, 2020 or 2018, this might fit that. Let's go back and pull that out and apply it to what we're doing now. So again,
change the terms of service.
Yeah.
All the time.
Right. So, that's the thing for me that I try to explain to people, especially with technology. Just be mindful of what you're doing, because it could have broader implications. People say, well, why do you have to think that? You never know, blah, 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 which is all true. But for me, again, being in this industry, knowing how things work, it's something where it's like, let me be mindful and cognizant of what could happen. It could never happen, but what if it does? I like to be prepared as much as possible in those instances, or at least be aware of the potential of it.
All right. So enough of that. Let's move into second string, where we talk all things tech in general. I put this title: Google tries bribery to train YouTube music AI. So basically what is happening is YouTube is trying to create these products. They mentioned in this story that I found on Ars Technica, they've got this feature or this service called Dream Track.
Okay.
And basically what it is a generative AI tool that lets people create short music clips by entering a text prompt. The product, yada, 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 was made. Dream Track was designated to imitate the sound and lyrics of well-known singers. But only 10 artists agreed to participate in the test phase. So again, that's not enough data for YouTube to do anything. YouTube wants to sign up dozens of artists to roll out a new AI song generator.
And it depends on the type of artist, because if you're just some indie artist who doesn't have a lot of music, like, how does that play into it? But
right. So YouTube is stepping up its game. Basically what they're doing now is the company has recently offered a lump sum of cash to major labels, including Sony, Warner, and Universal, to try to convince more artists to allow their music to be used in training AI software, according to several people briefed to the matter. So it sounds like YouTube, specifically YouTube Music, is having some trouble finding the data to train on, because of course artists are like, no, what you're not about to do is replace me, and I'm not about to give you enough rope so I can hang myself.
Right.
So no, we're not doing it. So what do you think? Is YouTube stuck, or as time goes along, like you mentioned, and people kind of warm up to the idea of AI as a whole, Google will eventually be able to get over this hump?
I think eventually they'll be able to get over this hump. I think it's going to take a while. As you remember, I think it was on TikTok, I think Universal Music Group temporarily froze the usage of all of their content because, it gets kind of sketchy. Again, this is a new frontier of technology. And anytime you're on the precipice of anything like this, it's one of those things where it's like, where are you going with this? What exactly are you going to do? How is it going to work? What's the impact? Similar to what I was saying before, how is this going to impact me down the line? And YouTube has a ton of cash. And we all know that the music industry has changed a lot.
Right.
Most artists don't get rich
from
off
the label
of their music alone or the label. It's mostly touring. And for maybe those artists who haven't quite made the mark that they want, or haven't gotten, where they want, they may take the bait. And again, it's one of those things where I think YouTube is trying its best to get down the road. You know, they have a product roadmap of what they expect to do and what they want to do, and they know that they're going to need some assistance and intervention from actual people. That's how all of this works. That's how all of this AI thing works. It's not just some magical thing. It takes human intervention, and they are trying to get on the front side of this human intervention by getting artists to sign in and co-sign and be actually active participants in what they plan to do. So money talks, right? And so it only makes sense that, you know, they start, you know, dishing out ducats, since people aren't coming on board easily or willingly without, you know, a lot of pushback. So eventually I think they'll get there, but right now it's going to be hard because everybody is talking about AI. And then you've seen some of the AI art, some of the AI music that has come out of this. We saw what Drake did with Tupac's voice, and, you know, other people are kind of doing similar things. So it's one of those things where I think people are rightfully so a little skeptical of what all of this means and how it affects them.
Right. And not just for their art or possibly being replaced by AI.
Right.
You get screwed over by the labels because YouTube, let's just say this goes through and Sony and Warner and Universal do sign these agreements with YouTube. The artists will still get the short end of a stick because the labels are terrible for paying their artists, which is why
they'll get
most
an even
artists,
shorter end of the stick because they already get the short end of the stick with the labels. Now it's even worse.
Right. So again, in April, the story mentions in April more than 200 musicians, including Billie Eilish, did I say that right? Billie Eilish, yeah, and the estate of Frank Sinatra signed an open letter, and it reads, for the most part, unchecked, AI will set in motion a race to the bottom that will degrade the value of our work and prevent us from being fairly compensated for it, the letter said. Of course, YouTube responds and says, we are always testing new ideas and learning from our experiments, and it's important and it's an important part of our innovation process. We will continue on this path with AI and music as we build for the future. Again, the artists are saying we need to be at the forefront, not at the back end, right? Yeah. Which is why a lot of these artists are fighting, writing, and speaking out against AI because, again, these companies are full speed ahead. The labels are full speed ahead and not really considering or taking in part the actual artists, which the artists are like, nope, we've done it before in the past. No, we either need to be at the forefront or we're not joining at all.
And who wants to be an active participant in their demise?
Right.
Like it's one of those things where I get it. They don't know if they are writing their own resignation letter and they don't even know it. They could be putting themselves out of a job by quote unquote helping YouTube. Their label quote unquote helping YouTube. Helping them could be helping them right out of a job. So you know, I get it. And if you're on this music tip, and I mean, I think it even expands even further out as AI gets a little bit more broad in other industries. You start to think, are we writing ourselves out? You may not see it. You may already get your money. You may already get your fame. But what are you preparing the generations behind you? Are you setting them up for failure by being an active participant? We may not see the fruit of this labor for another 20 years, maybe another 10, however long. And by then, it won't necessarily impact some of these artists directly. But, you know, artists coming up, you know, what does that say to them? And that goes to movies, books, graphic artists, photographers. It stretches, you know, the full gamut, even outside of, you know, the entertainment space. So you just never know how this thing is going to quite kind of pan out.
All right. So enough of that. We're going to get into For the Culture, where we talk all things culture or culturally relevant topics. So this title I put in here is Married Women Can't Work Here. Basically what is happening is over in India, Apple has always partnered with Foxconn as a supplier for a lot of the parts that are come into iPhones, iPads, and all of their accessories, hardware accessories, and even computers, for lack of a better term. Foxconn has a new, not new. We all know Foxconn from China, to where all the labor putting together, assembly the parts.
Hardware, yeah.
Right. And now Foxconn, and then Apple by an extension, is expanding out in India, which is a whole untapped workforce of
huge
billions,
market.
right? Billions of people, right? But there's one particular group that it looks like is being denied from these bountiful of jobs, coming into India, which happens to be married women. And this story that I found talks about, a couple of women in their 20s have saw this ad in the paper, in the news, online, wherever they saw it, and said this Foxconn facility is hiring workers. Okay. So these women get on the bus, make their way out to this make their way out to the Foxconn plants. On multiple occasions, whether it be the person driving the truck, to the security guard, to whomever, it's like, yeah, I don't think they're gonna hire y'all. So they do it anyway. They go through the whole process, get to the gates, whatever the case may be, only to get turned around because, according to research, according to HR, according to a lot of other sources, I'll read this one from Reuters. A Reuters investigation has found that Foxconn has systematically excluded married women from jobs at its main India iPhone assembly plant on the grounds that they have, quote, more family responsibilities than their unmarried counterparts. The agents and the Foxconn HR sources cited family duties, the more important one, pregnancy, and higher absenteeism as the reason why Foxconn did not hire married women at the plant located in the city of Chennai in India. Many of these people also said jewelry worn by married Hindu women could interfere with production. So I just wanted to get your input on Foxconn and Apple by extension, which they are the main supplier for iPhone parts. How do you feel about these women in India getting discriminated against because they could have babies?
Gotta love the patriarchy, right? I'm tired. Really and truly tired of hearing these same types of stories that women are discriminated against. Whether you be unmarried, it's one issue. Whether you're married, it's another issue. If you have children, that's a third issue. And it's one of those things where people like to think, because it's 2024, we've advanced, we are so enlightened, we are so aware of the world around us, but there are still organizations and systematic, let me be clear, it's systematic discrimination that we're seeing. This is comes out of India, but you could flip this switch and throw a dart at a globe and hit any place else in the world, and it's the same thing.
Right.
And it's one of those things where, as I said before, capitalism is all about making the money. Right. And God forbid, someone you hire who was a human being after all.
Needs some assistance. Who
is a human, who you can't live in this world and not be able to take care of yourself. Or if you do these things, you say, well, you're saying I can't work, then you need to be able to provide me with income. No. You're being a leech. You're dragging down, the world economy and those things. You can't have it both ways. But what these companies do is they do these analysis and they, look at who takes off more or who, needs more time away. And the thing is, unfortunately, that role has fallen to women where women or people with uteruses, that's how more people get made.
Right.
You can't have more people made without these people.
More
And
workers specifically.
right. And in order to reproduce the population, you need people to have these children, right? I mean, that's how you get more people. But at the same time, the stress and toll, I've never had children, but I know people who have, and I've seen the toll that it takes physically and mentally on the body. You have to account for that. You can't just pop out a baby one day and then go about your business the next day. No, you're making additional people who have body parts and things go wrong, things break. They need, doctors or they get sick. And it's one of those things where the humanity is taken out of a lot of these decisions. And that's where I think as human people, we fail a lot of times. You take out the human condition, the human experience when you're making these decisions about productivity, about budgets and those businessy, accounting type of things. I don't know the words, but you take out the human element and the human condition of these things, and this is what you have. You have people saying, "Well, we're just not going to hire you." How?
Well, according to Foxconn, in a statement, Foxconn said it, quote, vigorously refutes allegations of employment discrimination based on marital status, gender, religion, or any other form. Apple told Reuters it upholds the, quote, highest supply chain standards in the industry, and noted that Foxconn employs some married women in India. They go on to quote and say, when concerns about hiring practices were first raised in 2022, we immediately took action and worked with our supplier to conduct monthly audits to identify issues and ensure that our high standards are upheld. All of our suppliers in India hire married women, including Foxconn. So again, who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the press release from Apple and Foxconn? Or are you going to believe these women who literally went to Foxconn and Foxconn said, no, we're not hiring you because you're married and y'all need to be at home in the kitchen. I added the last part, but that's pretty much the sentiment.
And the thing is, it's one of those things where it's like, you do understand that there are written rules and unwritten rules in pretty much everything, especially when it comes to the workplace. We all, work, not all, most people have worked in corporate America or worked in retail, or whatever the case. There are unwritten rules. You don't have to have it written down. Item number 1, don't hire married women. You can have conversations, or you can allude to things.
Or it can just be cultural. It could just be cultural.
Yeah.
That's another thing. That's another thing we're not considering over in India. There are a lot of cultural differences to where we over in America and be like, shame on y'all. But over in India, they're kind of like, this is just how we roll. While things are getting better, as you can tell, because women in India specifically are trying to be more upwardly mobile. They are trying to be or add to the financial outcome of their families and India as a whole. But there are still some, like you mentioned, patriarchal, if that's even a word, conditions that they still need to break through. There's still some glass ceilings that they need to break as well. And it could just be as simple as getting a job at a Foxconn factory making iPhones.
and let's not forget, America doesn't have too much runway to try to judge anybody, particularly when it comes to women, women's bodily autonomy, equity in pay.
Pick one, huh?
Any of it.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it's very hypocritical. Right. And again, like I said, you could throw a dart on the globe, and wherever you hit, you better believe that there is disparity,
discrimination, prejudice,
and discrimination, particularly on gender, also on race. So yeah, it's Unfortunately, this instance with Foxconn,
Nothing new, huh?
Nothing new. It's like I said at the top of this, I'm tired. I'm
Yeah.
so tired of this. And it's unfortunate that I don't see, similar to racism, similar to homophobia, I don't see a way around it because there are just some people who just want to be hateful.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole conversation for another day. So.
Yeah, that's the whole other tangent, but yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the hookup this week. There's not a lot. Well, for me, there is a lot of sports out there. There's Copa America soccer. There's the UEFA, I think that's what it is, over in Europe. Everybody is kind of gearing up for the Summer Olympics. You got track and field, Olympic trials. You got all these things happening. Right, yeah. WNBA, that's getting popularity. But in America, there's no basketball, there's no football. Maybe this feature was beneficial during football and basketball season, but for those who have an Apple TV, who looked forward to the little notifications of their favorite sports teams and the games that's happening, now that there's no football and basketball, you may be annoyed that you're getting soccer updates. You may be annoyed you're getting WNBA fourth quarter tight game between, so and so and so and so. You might want to turn that off because there's no football and basketball. So if you are one of those people that don't care about nothing but basketball and football, American basketball and American football, my tip for the week is you can turn off those Apple TV sports notifications. And basically what you do, turn on your Apple TV, open up the settings app, then you scroll down and select apps. At the top of the apps settings section, you select TV, scroll down to the notification section, then select exciting games to turn it off. So basically you have to turn off the exciting games. So basically what Apple does is if there's any games that's like getting close, it's tied with a minute left, Apple tries to notify you, especially if you've went in and selected your favorite teams. Like for instance, I've got the Colts, I've got the Hawks, I got the Pacers, got the Falcons, and I've got Atlanta United, right? Those are like my teams that I want to get sports updates from. Apple TV will take those. And if any of those teams specifically are playing and the game is tight, that notification will pop up in the upper right-hand corner. But again, if you want to turn that off, you actually can go in and turn that off. And then of course you do the opposite when football season starts up.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's my tip for the week. And Nika, if you don't have anything else, that's going to do it for this week's show. You can tell the folks where they can find you.
You can find me at Tech Savvy Diva everywhere.
And you can find me all over the internet at Brother Tech. That's BROTHATECH. If you want to learn more about the show, to comment, to go to the website, to find out what's the latest episode, please go to snoboscast.com to get all those details. And like I mentioned, for this week, we are out. Peace.
Bye, everybody.